Hello my dear friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I am Joy and today in this video we will be covering the fourth lecture on Handbook of Statistics that is published by the Reserve Bank of India. So for those who are watching the video for the first time, we have already started with Handbook of Statistics. It is a publication made by the Reserve Bank of India and as of now we have completed 3 lectures on Handbook of Statistics. The first lecture was on basic concepts which we will come across during this series of lectures. In the second as well as in the third lectures, we have completed the analysis of macroeconomic aggregates at the constant prices as well as in the current prices. So those lectures were very important because we were discussing the macroeconomic aggregates like the GDP, GVA, national income, the impact of all those in the economy, the trend of its growth, etc. So second and third lectures were very important and now we will be starting with the fourth lecture in this video. So this series will be a compilation of around 8 to 10 videos where we will be discussing the most important tables which are given in the Handbook of Statistics. So as we have said, Handbook of Statistics is a publication made by the Reserve Bank of India and it gives a complete analysis of various financial and economic indicators of the economy over a period of time. So this is an analysis and this analysis or this handbook contains around 1500 tables, but these all tables are not very important from the examination point of view. From the examination point of view, around 30 to 50 tables are important. So we will be covering this 30 to 50 tables in this 8 to 10 lectures. The initial 2 lectures were lengthy and it could cover only 2 tables. The reason is that these tables which were covered under those lectures were very important. It was on macroeconomic aggregates. So now from this fourth lecture onwards, we will be trying to cover at least 2 and maximum of 5 tables in one lecture. So today we will be continuing with table number 3. So already first 2 tables 1 and 2 covered in lecture number 1 and 2, which you can find either on my Facebook page or on the StudyIQ channel. And also for any queries related to your UPSC preparation or any other banking examination, RBI, NABARD preparation, you can keep in touch with me on my Facebook page. You can personal message me. I'll do my best to guide you. So we will start. Now in this video we will be starting with table number 3 as we have discussed. Table number 3 discusses about the components of gross value added or the GVA. We have already seen what is GVA. GVA is value of final output minus value of intermediate consumption. So we will see the components of GVA. So if we need to analyze the GVA, it has to be divided into 3 sectors. So what is GVA? It is the value of final output minus intermediate consumption. So from where will we get this final output? The final output can be derived from various sectors of Indian economy and we will analyze both in constant prices as well as in current prices. So now coming back to GVA, it has to be derived from 3 sectors and in Indian economy we have 3 important sectors: the primary sector, the secondary sector and the tertiary sector. Now we will quickly see what is this 3 sectors. You might be already knowing this 3 sectors. Otherwise an in-depth explanation of 3 sectors of Indian economy is provided on StudyIQ channel. You can watch it for more clarification. Now quickly going to the primary sector. Primary sector covers agricultural related activities like farming activities, cattle rearing, etc. So agricultural related activities are covered under the primary sector. Now coming to the second one, that is secondary sector, where industry related activities like manufacturing, production, etc. are covered. The third sector is the tertiary sector where service related activities are covered. So we will be analyzing 3 sectors differently in order to get the GVA. So GVA is final output minus intermediate consumption. So the general GVA of the economy is the final output of agricultural sector minus intermediate consumption plus final output of industrial sector minus intermediate consumption and final output of service sector minus intermediate consumption. So addition of all this will give you the total GVA of the economy. Before going on to the GVA, two things. One is the share of these sectors in GDP. What is the contribution of primary sector, secondary sector and the tertiary sector in the GDP? GDP is gross domestic product. It is the monetary value of all the final goods and services produced in an economy within a financial year. So if you take the share in GDP, the tertiary sector, that is the service sector, has the maximum share. And it is followed by the secondary sector or the industrial sector. And third is the primary sector or the agricultural related sector. So this is the share in GDP. Now coming to the share in workforce, that is the total number of employment generated by each sectors. The first one is primary sector. That means the agricultural related sector generates the maximum employment in the economy. Now second one is tertiary sector or the service sector, and the third one is the secondary sector or the industry related sector. Now what is the irony here? The tertiary sector contributes maximum to the GDP, but it is only the second when it comes to employment generation. But the biggest difference is seen in the primary sector. That is the biggest irony. What is the case with primary sector? It contributes the lowest to the GDP. But when it comes to employment generation, the primary sector contributes highest. When we say there is maximum employment generation in agriculture, it means that the maximum share of population is engaged in agriculture. But when the maximum share of population is employed in a particular sector, say for example agricultural sector, it should be having the most productivity or output should be maximum in the agricultural sector, because more the employment generation, more should be the output or the productivity. But here we will see the contrast. What is the reason? The reason is the productivity level of Indian agriculture is very less. This is due to lack of technological adoption, lesser irrigation. If we see, there is less than half of Indian cropland or agricultural land is being irrigated, more dependent on monsoon rainfall. So all these are the reasons which we have discussed in detail during the lectures on economic survey. You can watch the series on economic survey volume 1 and volume 2 for more analysis of the different sectors of Indian economy. Now coming back to the table. In the table we will see that the contribution of agriculture, industry and also services to the GVA. Here the maximum is contributed by the service sector. It is not only the maximum, it is almost 6 times the agricultural sector and also 3 times the industrial sector. So the contribution of service sector to the GVA is very important. It is not only more but comparatively or relatively very high compared to the other two sectors. And also regarding the services sector, if we observe from 2011-12 to 2017-18, we will see that there was a rapid growth. The pace of growth was very high. It has almost doubled over these years. But if you look at agricultural sector, we will see that there is no much difference from 2011-12 to 17-18. So the production in the agricultural sector or the GVA in the agricultural sector remains almost the same over all these years. Now the industrial sector. Here also we will not say such a significant improvement as in the case of services sector. So services sector in the Indian economy is growing at a very rapid pace and contributing to the gross value added in the economy. So this is the role of the service sector in employment generation as well as in economic growth and development. Now we have seen all this at constant prices. What is constant prices? We have already discussed about the concept of constant prices in the previous lecture. So in the constant price we will take the base year price. But when it comes to current prices, the current year price is taken into consideration. Now what is constant price and current price? Base year price means a base year will be set. So what is the base year? 2011-12. And how is this base year chosen? This is chosen as a normal year. So a normal year would be taken as a base year, and normal year in the sense that the inflation rates of the year would be normal. So such an year with lower inflation rates or normal inflation rate is chosen as base year, and the base year is considered while considering the constant price. So the first table gives you GVA at constant prices, that is gross value added at constant prices. So here what will happen? The production is multiplied with base year price. Now coming to the second part of the table, here GVA is calculated at current prices, that means market price. So here production will be multiplied into current prices or the market prices. So what is the difference between base year price and market price? Under market price, inflation is taken into consideration. So the base year is 2011-12 and the market price means the price at 2017-18. So over these years the inflation rates might have increased or the level of inflation might have increased. So this rise in inflation is taken into consideration at the second part, that is at the current prices. So in current prices inflation is taken into consideration and at constant prices base year price is taken into consideration. Now you have to tell me which value would be higher. Of course the second one is higher, the GVA at current prices. If you see, you will observe it in both the three sectors. We will see that in the second part of the table the value is higher. What is the reason for higher value here? It is due to inflation, because under the second part market price is taken into consideration where inflation is also added. So which one will give you a real picture of the economy? The first part, that is at constant prices, base year prices. The second one, it is inflated prices. So we will see the value is higher in the second part, that is at current prices, but real picture is shown in the first part, that is constant prices. So this is all with table number 3. Now let us move on to the next table. In the previous table we have seen components of GVA, that is gross value added. Now we will see components of GDP. GDP is gross domestic product. So what is the difference between GVA and GDP? GVA means the value of final output minus value of intermediate consumption. But GDP is the final value or monetary value of final goods and services produced in the economy. So the intermediate consumption is not reduced in GDP. Now we will see the components of GDP. The main components of GDP is private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, gross fixed capital formation, changes in stocks, valuables, exports, imports. So these are all the important components of GDP. So a sum of all this will give you the GDP or the gross domestic product of the economy. Now let us see private final consumption expenditure. It is the consumption expenditure incurred by the private sector. Next is government final consumption expenditure, that is the public sector. Third is the gross fixed capital formation. It means the rate of investments or the value of investments made in the economy. Next is changes in stocks and valuables, that is assets. Next is two important components, that is exports and imports. So what is exports? Exports refers to the value of goods and services that are being exported from our country to a different country. So it happens from India to rest of the world. Now imports means the value of goods and services which are imported to India from the rest of the world. So it is from rest of the world to India, to our country. And the sum of all these components will give you GDP. And here two important things to be noted, imports and exports, because this is very important in the current scenario. So we will see that the exports from the country has increased, but at the same time the imports to the country has also increased. And here we will see that the exports from the country is less than the imports to the country. Imports is 29,348.79 billion, but exports is only 26,279 billion. So the difference between exports and imports is known as deficit, surplus or balance. So what is the situation of deficit? Deficit means when the imports are higher than the exports. This is deficit. Surplus means the exports are higher than the imports, and balance means exports equal to imports. And from this illustration or from this table, it is understood that India has a deficit. So we call it as current account deficit. So when the value of imports is more than the value of exports, it is known as current account deficit, and India has a current account deficit. But ideally for a country, it should be a current account surplus. That means the value of exports should be more than the imports. For example, China. So Chinese economy has adopted a policy where the exports from the country would be more than the imports, and that has led to the current account surplus in the Chinese economy. And when there is a current account deficit, the demand for the local currency, that is in case of India, the Indian rupee will fall because there is lesser demand for rupee, and it will lead to depreciation of rupee. But when there is a current account surplus, there will be more demand for Indian rupee, and when the demand increases, the value also increases. It will lead to appreciation of rupee. So current account deficit is directly linked with rupee depreciation, and current account surplus is linked with rupee appreciation. So ideally in an economy, there should be a current account surplus, and the government is formulating many manufacturing policies, export policies, etc. in order to boost the exports from the country. Now here also, under the components of gross domestic product, we will see there is a evaluation made at constant prices and current prices. We have already discussed what is constant price and what is current price. Current price means market price and constant price means base year price. So we have seen in the previous table also, normally the GDP at the current prices would be more than the GDP at constant prices. So in this table also, the GDP at market prices or current prices is more than the GDP at constant prices, and this difference is due to a difference in the rates of inflation. Under constant prices, base year price is taken where inflation is not taken into consideration, but under current prices, market price is taken and where inflation is taken into consideration, and it has an impact on the GDP. Now in this lecture we have covered two another important tables. One is components of GVA and components of GDP. These two tables are also very important from examination point of view. You must have a clear understanding about the performance of Indian economy on the basis of GVA and GDP. You should also be aware of the components of GVA, components of GDP, how it is calculated, what is the difference between current price and constant price, how it reflects the real picture of the economy, and how inflation is taken into consideration, etc. So these two tables are also very important from examination point of view. And in the next lecture we will continue with some other important tables from examination point of view. And if you have any queries related to your preparations, you can please get in touch with me on my Facebook page, or if you have any suggestions for improvement, please do message me. We will continue with this series in the next lecture. Thank you.